What do you think of the job the Fed is doing right now?
I do not think I could run the Fed as well as Jay Powell's run. I think Jay Powell has been a terrific, and part of the job. Well, look at Paul Volcker back in the 1980s. I mean, people were sending him. You know, I mean, he needed Secret Service protection and everything else. But in the end, he felt his responsibility was to do the right thing at the Fed, and he didn't give a damn about what anybody wrote about him or anything else. And I think that he's one of my heroes, and I think he's one of Jay Powell's heroes. And I think Jay Powell did the same thing actually in March of 2020 when we went into the pandemic. I think at the annual meeting that year, I said, you know, that he was a hero and he is a hero, and you have to act, and you have to act on insufficient information, and you've got an ultimate responsibility to the American public. And it doesn't mean you can stop recessions. It doesn't mean that you can turn bad loans into good loans or anything else. But it does mean that you got to keep the system working. And the system came close to stopping. If you read a book called $1 Trillion Triage, you can get it on a day-by-day account. And people don't know how close it was. And Jay Powell did not call for studies or position papers and, you know, lengthy debate and everything. You just don't do it. You act. And that's what Paul Volcker did. And I thank heavens, you know, Jay Powell was there. I mean, you could have gotten a very different result in March of 2020 after the pandemic broke out.
Did the Fed keep rates low for too long after that?
Who knows? Who knows? We won't know. I don't know what they precisely should do, and nobody does. And they follow conventional wisdom and all of that, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But since 1942, you know, we've made all kinds of mistakes in this country, and we'll continue to make them, but somehow the system works pretty damn well. I'd rather own stocks than bonds over many years. I'd rather own part of America than try to squirrel my money away somehow. Other place I thought, you know, maybe in Switzerland, Credit Suisse or something like that. It just, people are, they don't really get any wiser about this sort of thing. People, somebody else fire, they're going to run for the door. I mean, it's built into, fear is so easy to arouse in people. And you talk about fear about their money, and they don't really understand the system necessarily or anything of the sort, and they can actually, by their own actions, then create what they were afraid of. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and it actually, yeah, my dad hated Franklin D. Roosevelt, but so I grew up, first 10 years of my life, I couldn't get dinner unless I said something nasty about Roosevelt or something. But over the years, you know, when Roosevelt said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, he was 100% right. When he closed the banks and said, I'll open the good ones a week from then, he didn't know anything about which bank was good or bad or anything like that. But people just needed that, get an appropriate confidence. And now they've really got an appropriate confidence because we didn't have an FDIC, and we didn't have an FDIC that was required for every bank. A lot of banks fought the idea. And now we've got a system that works, but people are still scared when they get scared. And being scared is so contagious. You can't imagine what it was like that weekend after Silicon Valley. I mean, you know, the guy that drives me around because I can't see that well, and you know, all he was talking was banking, you know, and he would, you know, what should he do? And it's unnecessary fear is a terrible thing to give people. And Roosevelt and the New Deal really wanted to get rid of that. And here we are X years later, and we've got a mechanism that's so much better than we had going in, but people really don't quite understand it. And maybe, you know, maybe it takes the President of the United States to just go on and deliver Roosevelt's message and make it more clear to people what we really do have and what they need to be worried about and what they don't need to be worried about. But of course, if you're in you're trying to win an election next time, you tell people, that if you're out of office or you're out of control, you tell them how terrible the other guy is for getting them into this problem. And that's going to always live with us.
So you look around and you're not worried at this point?
Well, at 92, I've got other things to worry about. No, I'm not. I don't worry about our ability. There's things I worry about. Sure, I worry about the nuclear threat. I worry about a pandemic in the future and all kinds of things. But I don't worry about them because I can't do anything about them. But I actually, that's what I originally thought my money could be best used for. But I don't know any answers now after 40 or 50 years of thinking that way. But I'm not, I don't worry about, no, I don't, I never go to bed worried about Berkshire and how we'll handle things. If I'm worried about Berkshire, I should figure out something different to do about what Berkshire is doing. But Berkshire is my responsibility, and I think I was very, very, very lucky that Berkshire happened to be in America, and I happen to be an American. I was born in 1930, and I've been in a golden age ever since I was born. The GDP per capita is up like 6-fold or 7-fold in one person's lifetime. There's never been anything like that in the history of mankind. And so, we love to complain about wherever we are, but most people don't work on Saturdays and don't work on Sundays, and when I was a kid, everybody worked on Saturdays. And I mean, the world has changed so much for the better in terms of, how well off people are compared to any other time in history. If I'd been born 150 years ago and I went to the dentist, I mean, they'd pour whiskey down me and all kinds of, there's just all kinds of improvements. But it's man's nature to be dissatisfied. And politics does stir that up. And you've got to say, if you're out of power, that the other guy is screwing up and you could do better. And that's just built into the system. But that was the case when I was a kid, and it's the case today.